The Everyman podcast, the place where real men talk.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Everyman podcast. Tonight we have a very special guest. We have Tim Harkness, the head of sports science and psychology at Chelsea Football Club. Tim is an expert in all things elite performance and psychology. Boys, how excited are we to have Tim on the podcast tonight?
I'm over the moon, Lewis. I'm over the moon. Our first guest, well, obviously we had a dropout last week. And obviously there's 9 of us guys as well, so I've had to fight off 6 other guys to get a place yet. Have a chat with Tim as well, just to try and pick his brain. So looking forward to seeing what he's got to say. You know, someone who's been in the elite game for a while now. I think reading from his profile and sort of looking at his background, he's been at Chelsea from up to around 14 years now. So it'll be good to pick his brain. I'm looking forward to it, Lou. What about you, Dean?
Yeah.
Exactly the same, mate. Especially being a massive fan of football and him being at one of the top clubs in the world, really, Chelsea Football Club. Maybe not this season, but normally. Really keen to pick his brains on how the everyman and the elite athlete sort of are different, but also maybe similar in some ways as well. So super keen to see what he has to say. To be honest.
Yeah, me too. Well, let's kick it off. Good evening, Tim. Tim, how are you doing tonight?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Very nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, we're very happy to have you on the pod tonight. You're actually technically our first guest. We have lots of guests booked in.
Oh, wow.
We have, no pressure here, by the way. We have lots of guests booked in. We were supposed to have a guest last week who dropped out last minute. So you essentially get the title of the Everyman podcast first ever guest.
Thank you.
So congratulations on that one.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so what we're going to talk about tonight, Tim, and why we wanted you on the podcast is essentially to talk through the difference of the everyman, which is us, and elite athletes. So do you mind telling us and the listeners a little bit about what you do in your day job, your day-to-day life?
Cool.
And then I'll provide some sort of context of what the podcast is going to be about.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm a psychologist, so I started off my professional life as a normal counseling psychologist, working in a private practice out of a back room in my house in Durban in South Africa, and have always, sounds like same as you, always been interested in sport and dreamt of working in elite sport, and kind of got this amazing out of the blue opportunity to work at Chelsea Football Club. And have been there for the last 14 years.
Wow.
And just had, an incredible experience of learning from people and seeing things from behind the scenes. At the same time, I'm a kind of keen squash club player. So, I've played squash pretty much 40 years now and still got a lot to learn and still, running around. So, that's the everyman side of things.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that. So when you're talking about yourself in a sport, obviously everyone would think Tim's at Chelsea, he must play football, but you're saying squash. How do you compare in squash? Like, are you close to an elite level squash player, or are you as bad as possibly we are?
Well, the thing in squash is, unless you're in a very, very small minority, there's always someone better than you and there's always someone worse than you. So I'm in that category.
Okay.
But I do love the game and I play it a lot and I think about it and I really enjoy it, so I'll say, in terms of how much I love it, I'm probably above average, put it that way.
Yeah. I can safely say can safely say I'm below average. I can safely say that one on squash.
I'd say in this podcast you're above average.
I mean, if you play the game, you're probably above average.
Yeah, possibly actually. Yeah.
I would also like Lewis is below average at squash. Just to let out there know he is below average. I'm not going to bring up he is not the best.
You're seconding that. You're not having any.
I'm not.
You're not sugaring that.
But I'm not saying Lewis is the best either.
Thanks, mate. That's really nice of you. There.
Right. Now we're clear on that.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Tim, what we would like to go through next a little bit is probably around your personal story. So you have touched on it. You initially started as you say, a regular psychologist, and you've got yourself into the position that you are now. You're working at Chelsea Football Club, which is more around the sports science as well as just obviously psychology. Tell me how you got into that. What did your early career look like, and to where you are today, really?
Yeah. Well, I started off as a scuba diving instructor. That was my first job. It was kind of my university job, and I loved it. But I think it really taught me a lot because it's working with people, it's working under pressure situations. And I know I was having a family dinner once when I was a diving instructor when I was 20 years old, and a couple of the older generation in my family were executives in businesses. And I said to them, I've got a higher stress job than you have. And they both kind of laughed at me and thought, well, what's stressful about that? But, when you've got 8 people underwater that you're responsible for, you definitely need to be paying attention and you need to be following processes. So I think that was definitely part of my formative experience, was talking to groups of people, teaching people, and then also being very aware of what could go wrong, having contingency plans, and just kind of keeping a very tight control of things, but then also developing this ability to be very calm under pressure. Because, you're in literally life-threatening situations. I got into a bit of cave diving and wreck diving. And, some of that is you cannot afford to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So, and then I originally wanted to be a marine biologist, but I flunked out of the course. I didn't get good enough marks through not working hard enough, amongst other things. And then sort of went into psychology and ended up a psychologist. And then, like I said, always had this love of sport that I probably mainly got from my dad, playing sport with my dad, watching sports on TV with my dad, that was really probably where it started, and learned a lot from him. And then kind of, I think that's where it began.
Yeah. Now that kind of resonates with a lot of people, though, where you had that idea in your head of being a marine biologist, and then obviously you've had to make a career pivot based on some of your life experiences, and maybe you didn't put the grades in, or as you say, you didn't work quite as hard. How did you find that? If you reflect back on that sort of period in your life, and lots of our listeners may be in that sort of stage in their life where you have that thought, I'm going to do something, but actually life gets in the way, and then you have to make a different career choice.
Yeah. It was quite a shock, and looking back, it took me some time to mature. I was quite a naive, I don't know, student or young man. I sort of look back and think, how did I didn't have good processes in terms of actually getting through a degree. And I didn't have the ability to concentrate well. I couldn't organize myself. I couldn't motivate myself. So definitely feel like I lacked those skills. And it took me quite a long time in life to start to understand those. And now I think, in a way, the fact that I was bad at it in the beginning has almost made me better at it now, because I've had to sort of consciously develop those skills. It wasn't something that came naturally to me. But then, I mean, I'll still remember the phone call when they said to me, "You haven't made it onto the course," and it was a big shock. It was a big dream of mine. I mean, I wanted to study great white sharks. That's what I wanted to do. I couldn't really imagine anything else, and I mean, certainly hadn't thought of being a psychologist. I mean, what 22-year-old young man wants to be a psychologist? So, I don't know. Maybe Sorry,
it's quite a career flip, isn't it, Tim? Really, when you're going from one extreme to another, you know what I mean?
It was, yeah.
See, I do get that, right? But I can also see, and I'm about to compare an elite footballer to a great white shark here. So I'm doing something special to try and link them here, right?
Great.
No, but if you think of what a great white shark is, right? It is the elite fish. Is it a fish? I presume it's a fish.
Yeah.
I am not a marine biologist, just to be clear for all listeners.
Technically, it's not quite a fish, but it's a cartilaginous fish. But yes,
I
at
knew
least
that,
it's not a
Tim.
whale.
Just set you up there, mate.
He is not a marine biologist. Lewis is not a marine biologist, Tim. Just to let you know.
And neither am I.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't worry.
But I suppose is it that level of interest of, and this is me trying to link something that maybe isn't there, but
No, it's a good point.
like
It is
they
a
are
good
the
point.
elite. You
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
want to study goldfish or you didn't want to study
Yes.
clownfish. It was something that was actually like,
Yeah.
wow, there's a prestige I can imagine within marine biology of studying the great white sharks. You weren't just studying the everyday
Yeah.
fish.
It's true. You know, I never thought of that before.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think you got something there. And, you know, and I said my dad was the one who introduced me to sport. And my mom was the one who really sort of, I mean, I struggled at school, you know, I like I said, I mean, looking back, I probably had, you know, raging ADHD and, you know, whatever else you would call it. And looking back, I think it was my mom who sort of encouraged me to dream and, you know, to strive and managed to help me, you know, not get too much of a battering from the fact that I didn't really fit in at school and, you know, it didn't bring the best out of me. So, yeah, so, you know, that was probably my mom that I wanted to study great white sharks. And then
elite athletes.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. So, boys, I'm not sure about you. What does your Ethan, Dean? What does your past? Is there any sort of similarities between any life challenges that you guys have had where you've had to make a bit of a pivot?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start first if that's all right, Dean. So, Tim, you know, I appreciate you sharing there, and I think for me personally, my mum was a massive person behind me throughout my whole life. I was unfortunately not lucky enough to have sort of my dad around. He was sort of in the background a lot, wasn't really bothered. You know, he didn't really take me to sporting events. I was lucky enough to have great grandparents and things like that. But, you know, having a mother behind you is, I think her being the mum and dad to me is just a financial and big struggle for her. But she managed it great. And, you know, I think I wouldn't be in the position I am, like I say, working my current job, being here talking to you, or someone who's an expert in his field. You know, this is such an honour to be with you, and like the fact that without her, I'd probably not be here. So she's a massive driving force. So I can definitely see where you're coming from on that side, Tim. And it's really nice to hear that she was a driving force behind you, similar as my mum was throughout my life.
Yeah.
Something that as well, Tim, as well. Obviously, a lot of when you were saying you were working sort of in the scuba industry, and obviously you went cave diving as well, things like that. When you were young, did you ever sort of have any techniques in those high stress environments that you would maybe use, or any sort of stress relief, anything like that, especially when you're either looking after yourself in dangerous situations, or actually when you're looking after people in those situations? Just because when you were saying a remarkable story, and I'd just like to know if you had any sort of techniques or anything that got you through those.
Yeah. Well, I can actually give you quite a precise answer to that. You know, my dad read me a story once about a scuba diver who got trapped in a fishing net. And when he was trapped, his breathing rate increased by a dramatic amount, which obviously is counterproductive. And scuba diving is about breathing. And you become very aware of your breathing because you're trying not to breathe too much, because if you breathe too much, you're going to use up all your air. And then you have to go back to the boat when it's much more fun to be under the sea looking at fish. And because you can actually see the bubbles, you notice the process of your breathing much more. And then there's something else which is interesting. Because you're breathing pressurized air, there are more oxygen molecules per lungful than you get at the surface. So you have this kind of amazing experience of breathing in, and it just lasts forever. So you can just take this breath in and then just very, very slowly let it sort of drift out of your lungs. And I think without really realizing it, scuba diving taught me how to breathe. And breathing is such a fundamental connection between your mind and your body, because it is a way of, it's something that you can consciously control, but then it has this really deep effect on your body, which then sort of subconsciously affects your mind as well. It's a wonderful loop that happens. And I do remember once I got into when I said I used to wreck dive, I didn't do proper wreck diving. I just went into wrecks. And on one occasion I got lost inside a wreck, and I didn't have a torch, I didn't have anything, and I was just in this room, and I thought to myself, I don't know how to get out. And this is not a massive problem. You know, a wreck is sort of similar in size and complexity to a double-story house. So, you know, if you imagine if you were inside a house and all the lights went out, you'd kind of find your way out eventually. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I'm lost. I don't know how to get out. And I looked down and I reached down and I took my gauge and I thought to myself, so this is how long you've got. And this is how long you got to solve the problem. And I remember my breathing became very calm and very relaxed and very slow. And that was a consequence of the years of training that I'd had and years of attention that I'd paid to my breath. And that is something I don't scuba dive anymore. But I think that was a really kind of profound lesson that I learned. And that's something I'd recommend to anybody is learn how to breathe. You know, I don't care how you do it. Some people do, you know, Pilates or yoga or, you know, Tai Chi or whatever it is, or just straight biofeedback or, you know, whatever, but learn how to breathe. I think and spend time doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So there's been times in my life, even when I think the times I've just had to give a presentation at work, right? I'm definitely not stuck underwater, potentially life or death. But it's that times when anxiety starts to creep up a little bit and you're like, oh, there's a bit of pressure here. And the only way you can actually control it, you have the water trick maybe, but it's breathing. It's that ability to, in your mind, slow things down. Like, as you say, you take that deep breath. And when you're breathing out, the process just, everything slows down. You start to regain control of your situation, don't you?
Yes.
And you can think with
exhalation.
clarity. Yeah, exactly.
It's what you're saying. It's the exhalation. Kind of magic happens in the exhalation.
Exactly.
That's definitely something that I've seen personally. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just saying the big thing recently, especially during lockdown and that as well, was the Wim Hof.
Wim Hof. I was thinking that.
Okay. I've heard a lot about him, but what specifically are you thinking of?
Yeah, so he does a lot of cold. I'm sorry, I'm telling you how to suck eggs here, but he does a lot of like cold water therapy and
yes.
he does breathing techniques in ice baths and underwater situations. And there's a breathing technique for having cold showers and learning how to adapt your breath in different situations. There's like you say, there's such a broad horizon of avenues he covers. Sort of, I would just say that's just something sprung to mind there. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So, Tim, I think it would be silly to not ask you that question when Ethan's just brought up cold showers. Do you have any sort of insight? Is there a benefit for taking cold showers? Is it something you've looked at before? It's definitely something I float between. Is it a good idea or not? And I've tried, and it's too cold, and I get out.
Yes. Well, you're talking to someone from Durban, South Africa.
Yeah.
So, you know, cold and me are not two things that originally went together.
Yeah.
But I do think, you know, I mean, from a sports recovery point of view, there is benefit to exposing yourself to cold. And, you know, physiologically what happens is when you get cold, you get vasoconstriction. So your blood vessels constrict. And then as you warm up, they open up again and you have this kind of flushing effect. So that's why a lot of athletes after sport, ideally they're doing contrast. They're getting cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, hot. A cold shower is a slightly different thing. And, you know, I don't know if there's any particular physiological benefit to having a cold shower, but I think learning how to control yourself under that stress, because I think you get in the cold and you can almost have a panic response, you know, where you want to tense up and you want to you want to breathe like that. And everything wants to get into your chest, and then practicing taking it down. I think that's really good practice. Yeah. So, you know, I'm not practicing what I preach here because, like I said, I'm from Durban and I'm used to warm water. But but for those people who do it, you know, well done. I think that's good work.
I definitely feel I will try it again.
Yeah.
It's something that my physio recommended for me because I struggle with tight coughs. and he recommended the cold bath. And at first, I couldn't get it. I couldn't stay in at all. But the breathing really does help just to calm it down.
Yeah.
But after a while, it just feels, once you've been in there for, like, say, if you can get past the first minute or so, it's almost like you're in warm water. You get that sort of, you get used to it, you know.
Wow. So where do you do it? Just in a bathroom, or do you do it
just in a bath? Yeah. So I've just got a bath. I just fill it up. To be fair, I can't go like under my chest, so I just do waist and under. And I just do 5 minutes after I've played football. Which, like, I shouldn't really need it. 10 minutes running the line.
Tim, you're going to find out the one thing that Dean loves is football. He's a trier. He really is a trier.
Yeah, sounds like me in squash. Just on the cold water immersion, by the way, one of my sporting heroes is my aunt. My aunt is 79 years old, and she plays competitive tennis, and she does ice baths for recovery.
That's amazing.
That is very impressive.
Yeah,
I do rate a good ice bath, and I tend to go down the sea. So I'm quite close to the coast up in Newcastle way, and I go in the sea for about 11 minutes at a time with my friend, one of my best pals, Rob and Ryan. We go in, and I think it's amazing, like you say, for techniques. Obviously, it's great that that everyone, the more people that do it, the better it is for recovery. I think it's become more well known now, because I don't think many people knew about it. Something I learned this week is actually physically, if you go in, if you do a big weight session and your aim is to become a bodybuilder or grow muscles, it's best not to go in up to 4 hours after your session, because it can actually,
interesting. It's
human.
Reduction in inflammation in the body and the muscles. And obviously, if you're wanting to build muscles and become this big Hulk strong man, obviously you're having the counter effect, because it obviously stops the lactic acid in there and obviously the inflammation. That's just something I learned recently. I mean, do you have any sort of insights on that? Anything you can give to any of us for sort of cold water in that sort of aspect? Or
Yes. Well, I mean, that is an interesting one, that, it's not always in your interests to jump straight into cold water. I do think, by the way, that North Sea up at Newcastle, how beautiful.
It's stunning. We all live right next to the coast as well.
Do you
We
really?
are very lucky. Yeah, we do. Very lucky. I'll send you some pictures. On my mother's side, I'm South African, but on my mother's side, her family was from Newcastle.
Really?
We actually went up on holiday last year, last November, and I just found your beaches and that North Sea are just so beautiful.
We're very lucky.
Yeah. So to answer your question about cold water immersion, there are protocols. So I think just to keep it simple, I think the one idea is that it's contrast rather than just cold water. So ideally, if you can actually go hot cold, that would be the one thing. And then the other thing is, some people go super freezing, and the alternate theory is don't go too cold, rather have it around 12 degrees and actually stand longer, rather than having it 0 degrees and you sort of suffering for 30 seconds. So, those are two ideas. But what I would do is, I think just do your research, make sure you've got a reputable source, and see what protocols are being advised.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, Tim, that was super helpful, and thank you very much. Definitely very insightful there. I feel like I have to overcome the cold showers. It's a pledge now.
We should do it.
It's one of those where now we've said it, I kind of have to do it, but really don't want to do it.
I haven't said anything, but
yeah, Tim's staying very quiet there. Well done.
Yeah, if you do, well done. Yeah,
very, very true. So Tim, just to probably move it along to where you are today. So obviously you started off your early career, and you've mentioned briefly how you went into psychology and then into the sports side. Do you mind telling us a little bit around what that transition was like, moving from maybe a different environment to the environment that you're in today, and what the challenges were around that?
Yeah. Well, maybe, I'll just say for starters, just out of respect to my employer,
Yeah.
I can't say too much.
Of course, yeah, of course.
Just as any client, I can't really talk about the client, and
Of course.
just because of privacy and that kind of thing.
And we wouldn't expect you to at all.
Thanks. I think maybe when I was in private practice, everybody who came to see me wanted to see me. And everybody would come into my little room and they'd sit there for an hour. And that was all very controlled. And, I'd done that for however long, I mean, quite a long time. I think maybe 13 years or something like that. And I'd got quite good at it, like that very controlled 1 hour conversation with the person who wanted to speak to me.
Yeah.
And then when I moved into a different world, suddenly I didn't always have an hour. The person didn't always want to speak to me. It wasn't always in my room, and I had to learn a whole bunch of new skills. And that was quite an eye opener. Having got to sort of a point in my career where I was starting to think, oh, I'm quite good at this. And then I suddenly realized, oh, you've got a whole lot of new stuff to learn.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of the experience.
Do you know there's one thing that springs, and it's literally just sprung into my mind there. Have you ever seen the program on Apple TV, Ted Lasso? Please say you have.
Yes, I've watched at least one episode, a couple of episodes.
So there's, I think, season 2, right? There's actually a therapist or a sports psychologist, right? But they overemphasize the role, and the players go in there like crying about their whole life, as in like, I can't. It might be daft things like they can't pay their bills, or they don't know how to do food shopping, or there's loads of daft things. They do little cameo bits, and then they get into the depth of it. And I suppose that's probably the stigma around men getting help when they're talking to someone professionally, that where I feel there's almost that stigma, especially even me. So before I ever had any sort of counselling or anything, I used to think, why do you need counselling? Why do you need help? Like, surely you just speak to your mum or your friends and you just deal with it and you crack on. But actually getting that help, it's not just talking and going in there crying or coming up with things that you... Like you're not silly for going there. And I know the program, for example, made a bit of a joke out of it. But like, there's so many benefits for men, women as well, obviously, but for men to actually speak up, because we have so much weight on our shoulders where we have to be the breadwinner in society. We have to be the really strong one. We have to be the one who protects everyone, like in our family and things. Subconsciously, I feel like a lot of men feel like they have the weight, like that sort of weight on their shoulders. But actually having that release to speak to someone like yourself or other professionals that are out there, what have you seen in your... There is a question here. I know I'm talking a bit, but what have you seen in your profession, the benefits of men talking and speaking up?
The one funny thing is, when I started as a sports psychologist, I started working in 1998. And I'd been doing it for about 5 years. And then Ernie Els, who's a legendary South African golfer, announced that he was working with a sports psychologist. And suddenly business got better, because if Ernie said he could do it, then everybody else, then we can do it too. So it was this amazing sort of change and stroke of fortune. And then I'd get introduced to people that say, oh, on the driving range, they'd go, oh, this is Tim, he's my sports psychologist. Whereas before, people were a bit more quiet about it. And then, what I would say is something I've become really interested in, because for a while people used to say sports psychologist, and then they would say performance psychologist, and then performance expert, and there's this whole sort of performance world, and then motivational videos and blah blah blah, and then it kind of, there's this almost this counter movement to the performance world. And in China, they've got this phrase, they call it the lying flat movement, and it's just, I'm going to lie flat. I'm not going to do anything. And it's quite anti this whole aspire and strive and work. And I mean, I certainly believe in rest. But something I've got interested in more recently is the notion of mental health and mental strength. And I think a lot of the time when we talk about mental health, we're actually talking about mental strength. And it's good to be mentally strong for sure, you know. And if you say to me, what is mental strength? I'll say, well, it's the ability to focus, it's the ability to be motivated, and the ability to be confident. So if I have to give a presentation, or right now, for example, what am I doing? I'm doing mainly mental strength stuff. You know, I'm focusing, I'm motivated, and then I'm trying to be confident so I can sort of hold it together and you know, and say what I think. And that mental strength is a choice. I have to choose to do it, and it's from the inside out. It's something that I have to deliver, and it takes energy.
Yeah.
And there's certain standards of mental strength. So were I to start, you know, losing concentration or messing around or talking rubbish, to some extent, I'm accountable to you, and you would, you know, you'd say, hey, come on, Tim, you know, sort of, you got to do a bit better here. And you're allowed to ask me for more mental strength. What you can't do is ask me for more mental health. You can't ask me to be mentally healthier. That's not how it works. So because, and sometimes I may not be motivated, confident, or focused, not because of a mental strength issue, it's because of a mental health issue. And if you treat a mental health issue as if it's a mental strength issue, you're going in the wrong direction. You're going to make the situation worse. And I think as men, this is something, sometimes we're so into sort of mental strength that when we struggle with our mental health, we treat it as if it's mental strength. And we say, well, I've got to choose to be mentally healthy. We think mental health comes from the inside out, and that takes us backwards.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it.
Mental health is not a choice. Mental health is an influence. Mental health is from the outside in. It's what happens to us. And we've got to treat that in a totally different way. So, you know, that's kind of something I've been thinking about, and I find it quite a useful distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've literally never looked at it like that. So I've read lots of books on mental health. I've watched video after video after video. I've had counseling sessions myself. I've tried to speak up myself, those sorts of things. And I have never tried to split the two, because even when you're saying it, it's resonating in my head, because I've always felt when my mental health's been bad, I just have to take more action. I just have to do more positive things. And yes, that provides a layer over the top, and it might mask it for a bit, but that underlying issue is never addressed.
That's it. Yes. And that's so key. It's so important. And this is where, because in some ways, if you don't have enough mental strength, I can criticize you to some extent. You know, if you just stop doing your job right now, I'll be critical of you. I'll hold you to account. But that's not how mental health works. Mental health doesn't respond to that. And if we confuse mental health and mental strength, we can be judgmental of ourselves or critical of ourselves when that is neither appropriate nor helpful.
Yeah.
And that's really what I kind of wish for mental health, is that we can understand that it is separate from choice. And because it's separate from choice, it's outside of judgment. And because it's outside of judgment, we can be open about it, because we can't be criticized for it. And when we're open about it, that's when we can be open to receiving the support and the care and the guidance that we need. Because mental health is from the outside in.
I've never seen it like that. That's really interesting. It's a completely different perspective than I've ever thought, I've ever been told. Or Tim, that's actually fantastic. I really appreciate you opening up, and it's definitely something to reflect on. I mean, Tim, just while going back, I know obviously you can't say too much in your current situation, and I would never want to pry in that door, but a lot of us in previous episodes have mentioned our own mental health struggles and not being able to go out and talk to someone. So we've not wanted to talk to someone, or we've maybe not known an avenue to go down. But it was quite interesting how you said you went from people walking through your door wanting to talk to you, obviously when you were independent, and now having to break down potential barriers with people who don't necessarily want to speak to you in the elite industry. And obviously not going into too much detail about your employer and things like that. Do you have any sort of references to obstacles that you had to overcome, that maybe we could flip it on that side of things and think of how you broke down those barriers and got people actually talking when they didn't really want to talk?
Yeah. Well, you know, first of all, I just say, you know, to to speak openly about difficulties with mental health is super gutsy, especially when you're a young man. So, I acknowledge that, and I'm awed by it, to have the courage to be open and just say, look, this is something that's been hard for me. And I think, in a way, the reason why it's hard is because people don't see the split. Because they almost think you're standing there going, I've got a problem with mental strength. That's what people can hear, but that's not the truth. Having struggles with mental health is completely different from having struggles with mental strength. And, I just really want to reiterate that distinction. And I think, why wouldn't people want to talk about it? I mean, this is not even my day job. This is why, in general, do people not want to talk about this stuff? I think a lot of it is because they don't know the difference between the two, and they're scared that they're going to be judged or criticized. Maybe also it's because, when you're feeling a little bruised, you become more sensitive to criticism, and you become more scared of being judged. So it's kind of a vicious circle. That's all very well when you're feeling confident. You're like, well, I'll tell you what I'm good at, and I'll tell you what I'm bad at. No problem. When you're feeling confident, that's easy. But when you're feeling a little more fragile, which all of us are from time to time, it's quite a lot harder to do that because we don't have the reserves. And sort of on that note, I would also hope that one of the things about mental health and looking at it in this way is that hopefully in those times in our lives when we are experiencing good mental health, and those of us who experience longer periods of mental health than others, hopefully have the humility to be grateful and recognize their good fortune in either being surrounded by the right people or having the right sort of safety barriers or whatever the case may be. That just as people who struggle from time to time with mental health can be forgiving of themselves and caring of themselves, I think when people are having a good run, they need to be grateful and they need to be humble.
Definitely.
Yeah, you don't know how lucky you are to have never had a real low in your mental health. Like, people don't understand that. Like, when I've had times in my life where I've not had, before I ever had a low, or what compared to some of the lows that I've had, I probably had no or very little sympathy for people who had. And it was probably what you're alluding to around, I was judging people on mental strength, not mental health, definitely. Right. And I just didn't have that self-awareness that one day my life might not be perceived as what I think is perfect, and I'm going to come into my own struggles. And luckily enough, as you grow up and you stop thinking that the world is all revolves around yourself, from being a kid to an adult, you understand. And luckily, I'm at a stage where I've got great people around me. We're doing this podcast, for example, to try and make sure even just us as a group of mates get to sit and talk about how we feel. And we're trying to encourage other men the first step is going, look, I just need to talk. I'm struggling a little bit. Can I just bounce some ideas? What's going in my head? That's it. And then try and speak to people like yourself or other experts out there who can help people then take the next steps, whether that's doctors, whether that's being more active, whether that's counseling, psychologists, whatever that might be, that helps people on that next step from, I have a problem or I'm struggling with something, now I need to do something about it.
Yeah. My mom used to tell me when I was a little kid, I'd never get lost in the supermarket because, like, the minute I was out of sight, I'd start crying so loudly that she'd just find me instantly. And I mean, she didn't tell you I was 15 at the time, but but I've always tried to remember that because I try to be true to that. I try to be true to, like, don't guts it out. There are times not to be mentally strong, and I've tried to remember when I'm starting to feel bad, I want to cry for help.
That's a really brave thing to say, and lots of men don't realize that. And we, as a three on this podcast, and there's 9 of the lads are involved in the podcast, and we'll talk at various times.
Yeah.
They all, or all of us, we've all had times in our life where we haven't opened up. So it's great that you had that skill or that instinct from a younger age to think something's not right, and you'll mock it, obviously, saying 15 crying and good joke, but around that idea of just speak up. That's the first thing you can do, is just speak up. Tell someone something's not right, because very quickly, even if you think you're alone, you're probably not. That's the thing, and there will be people out there who want to help you and want to make sure you're all right.
Yeah.
So, Tim, we're going to move on slightly. So, what we want to talk a little bit about. So, this is absolutely picking your brain around. So, we are all now Sunday League footballers, right? We all play at a pretty crap standard nowadays.
What positions?
Speak for yourself. I'm still 24 stone, but I could play championship, no bother.
Good. So, what positions do you play?
I'm now a centre midfielder. I've played a few positions growing up. I used to be quick, and I used to be a winger, but I'm definitely not quick now. So a centre mid.
Well, a 6 or an 8?
An 8. Definitely, I can still do an 8.
Okay, all right, no, good.
I can still do an 8.
Yeah. 6.
And on your mid to late.
I'm still going back. I'm going back to a 6 more. I can feel it, and it's horrible. It's the fact that you can't do the third man run. Like, you look at it, and it's like the ball's going forward, and it's that thought in your head going, if I go there, can I get back?
Yes.
And the thing is, nowadays, I can't get back.
Well, at least you can get there.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Where are you playing, Ethan?
Yeah, so I'm a goalkeeper. I think I was like in school. I think I was just the fattest kid, and they were like, put him in goal. And I thought I'd be half good, and I just wasn't. But being such a big lad, I let goals. I'm not gonna lie, especially throughout
the bravest position.
It's mad. My grand always said you've got to be mental to be a goalkeeper, because you put your head with.
You need a special. I've been very good friends with some goalkeepers. You need a very special mentality for that.
Do you know what? Right, playing football my whole life, I haven't ever met a normal person who's a goalkeeper. They all have a little bit of that, like that.
Who
no
wants to
fear.
play goal, man?
Yeah, who wants to stand somewhere and someone just boot the ball at you? Like, that is that's my worst nightmare. You're standing where it's pissing down with rain, like you're just freezing cold in the goal. Why would you want to do that?
You know what? It's them Sunday League pitches as well. Like the ball just bounces up like so randomly. Like, you can just get embarrassed by being a Sunday League keeper. It's just, I don't know why people do it.
Yeah.
So basically, what Dean's trying to say is, so for people who've listened to previous episodes, I've had 2 of my discs taken out at the start of the year, but I was playing football last year with these lads, and the last time I played football, despite having like back issues, I got lobbed from 70 yards on a free kick thrown half. So that's what Dean's trying to say subtly on the podcast.
Hey, I wasn't, mate. You was,
okay, all right.
Tim, the ball was here. The ball was here. You just had to just do this. That's all he had to do. He did this.
All right. Well, thanks for explaining the inside joke.
Ian, thank you. Appreciate that.
And then I play striker. But probably something to pick your brain on would be like the how confidence plays a role in football. Because something that I struggle with. Certain times for certain teams, I play unbelievable because I know that I'm like considered the better player in that team. But then when I play for like my Sunday team, I'm no longer the better player, so therefore my confidence lacks. And it's just interesting, the psychology between confidence and performance. We look at Marcus Rashford at the minute, banging form. But is he a better player than he was last year, or is he just more confident? Be interesting to pick your brain on that one.
Yeah. Well, I'll have a go right now. So when you're a striker, the moment before the ball gets to you, you have to be calm and balanced.
Mm-hmm.
When people are not confident, they compromise on that step. So there is this moment of peace that comes to a player just before the ball arrives to him. And he's generally going to be fairly upright. He's not kind of guessing where the ball's going to be. Fairly upright, very balanced. And you can just see the stillness comes over him. And then he executes and he goes for it. And that's what gets compromised. That is the step that gets cut out when people are lacking confidence. And they go from like hard running to hard kicking, and they don't have that step in between.
Right.
Yeah.
Did he do
Dean
me
had
next?
yeah, can you do goalkeepers?
Next, please. That's okay. You'll be here all night.
Yeah, so I'll give you the first one, Ethan. When the ball's coming, catch the ball. You have to put your hands on the ball.
I can't commit to that. I can't commit to that.
Yeah. Manage expectations.
Did you ever play football, Tim? Or was it just squash?
No, I did actually. I played under 10. I tried out for the C team, Mandine Park. First practice, they looked at me. That they immediately made me number 9. I was that much a cut above the rest, and we didn't. The whole team did not score a goal the whole season. Our goalkeeper scored an own goal. I was 1-on-1 with the goalkeeper on one occasion. I stepped on the ball, fell over heavily. That was our best chance. So I have played.
Yeah.
So no. So that, obviously it's been a learning curve for me, being in an environment where the sport is not natural to me. I've had to learn it. I mean, I love watching it. I love the game, but I don't sort of truly understand it as a player, and I've got to remember that.
Yeah.
But in
I
some ways,
that's a helpful thing, though, right? Because
in some ways,
there's
yeah,
you don't have your own idea of, well, I would have done that. You're looking at it objectively, saying that the best, the optimized performance, not just in theory, because you can step back and look at the data. You can really analyze it versus going, well, this is what I would do in that situation. So you maybe have a fresh pair of eyes on it.
Hopefully, I just remind myself that I'm not an expert and I don't know this.
Yeah.
And that, that everyman versus elite athletes. I was a very keen cyclist as well, and there's this website where you can actually compare yourself to the guys who ride the Tour de France. So you can see, and with it being cycling, you can really see the exact comparison, and you can compare every single stage, every single player. I mean, every single cyclist, and the answer is they are so much better than you. That's
levels.
That's just
There's
reality.
levels.
They are much, much, much better than you, and I mean, no shame in that. But I think it can be hard to appreciate in a sport like football, where they just make it look so easy. And in a way, the better they are, the easier they make it look.
Yeah, exactly.
I
suppose one question I have around it, right? So I'm surprised no one said it yet. So I was at a club up until I was like 16, and I didn't make it, obviously, because I'm doing the podcast, and I'm not one of your clients at Chelsea, for example, right? It's that balance between talent and hard work. So growing up, I seen people who definitely should have made it 100%. They had literally all the talent in the world. And some of my friends who are footballers definitely weren't the most talented, but were the most committed, hardworking. Definitely had the elements of luck, because I think to be an elite athlete in any sport, there is still an element of luck, because you have to be seen by the right people. You have to have the right environment, whether that's home life, family life, the ability to train. There's an economic part to it. I know football kind of gets away from that slightly, but it's not cheap to play football. It's not cheap to travel around the country and play for top teams. It's not, especially at sort of youth level and things. So I'd be interested in understanding your sort of thoughts on talent versus hard work, and what, again, the everyman. I'm going to contextualize that to the everyman. Like, you might not be the most talented at something, but actually, if you put the effort in over time with consistency, you can achieve great things.
Yeah. And then, for me, I would ask, what are those great things?
Great point.
I'm a member of Ashted Squash Club. We're this little squash club, in the town of Ashted, and kind of know everybody at the club. And one of my mates called Baz, he's in his mid-80s and he still plays squash. And the other day I was walking past, watching him, and someone played a drop shot to him and he didn't get to it, but he made a good, strong step in the right direction. And I thought, if I can be like that when I'm in my mid-80s, that's awesome. I said my aunt, she's one of my sporting heroes. Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Because she's healthy and she's strong and she's she's agile and she gets out and has fun and tries and works, and to me those are the great things. And maybe I've sat with someone who won the World Cup and he went, so what?
Wow.
And that's, I mean, I've sat with people who've won Olympic gold medals and they've gone, oh, what was that about? And that is where I do feel very privileged to have actually had those conversations, because people think this is the ultimate dream. They think it just can't get better than that, and they think it's life changing. Well, it isn't. Even so never mind. And then if that's not life changing, and if an Olympic gold medal is not life changing, well then, what goal of mine, like that I want to get promoted from the 5th division to the 4th division, how's that going to change my life? So then I think to be really clear on what is the goal and what is the purpose of sport, and friendship, companionship, the opportunity to learn, the opportunity to move, and we get back to breathing, and breathing being good for your body, and your body being good for your health and your mental health. Well, so is moving. Moving is this profound thing that affects you in ways that we don't understand. Sport is an opportunity to move. It's an opportunity to express ourselves, to feel powerful, to change the world. And then you've got the health side as well, which is also great. So, for me, those would be the great things. And my ambition, for anyone playing sport is keep doing it. Would you rather be a millionaire athlete who's earned, 10 million pounds and never play sport again after the age of 30, or someone who works an ordinary job but is fit and healthy all their whole lives?
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, right? Because if you were to ask the everyman, naively, most people will bite your hand off at the first one.
Yeah.
I want the money and I don't really care about the sport and the health.
Yeah.
And I think lots of people would say that.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is probably that deeper thought around that you might be a millionaire at 30, but you could live another 50, 60, 70 years.
Yeah.
What are you going to do for the rest of your life? Like, money's not actually the answer. It's as you say, it's the act of doing, the act of getting all that great feeling when you exercise and that great feeling when you're out and about doing things. To never have that feeling again, it's worth more than money.
Yes. And I'm 50, so I'm kind of on that journey, and I feel incredibly grateful, and I don't know when I'm going to do my calf or twist my knee or whatever. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to play squash for. I mean, I hope for a long time, but I don't know. But I'm very grateful for the fact that I can, and it, for me, that is priceless. I really love it, and I mean, I wouldn't mind.
I think coming back.
Yeah, exactly. I was waiting for you'll still take the money sometime.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tim. I was just going to say, going back to what you were saying before about like the player that won the World Cup and then said, so what? And the Olympic medalist. I think a lot of people have these sort of end goals, and when they get to the end goal, they realize that it's sort of meaningless. What's the next goal? And I think I've always struggled with my weight loss. I've always yo-yo dieted. I'll go on 1,200 calories, get as low as I can, and when I get to my goal weight, I celebrate by eating. And yes, I've got to 12 stone now. I can go. Whereas now I've sort of changed and I've become a healthier person. So I just make healthier choices. What would a healthy person do rather than having that goal? And I think it's something that's massively helped me, enjoying the journey rather than the destination.
Okay. And I mean, an example of that choice, what would it be?
Like, for example, I wouldn't cut out now. I wouldn't cut out all, what you would consider unhealthy foods, chocolate and stuff. I just make better choices. So, rather than before, I would go and get a multi-pack of Kit Kat and get 4 and eat all 4 of them. I'll have one, but I'll just have it as part of a healthy, balanced diet rather than cutting out foods and craving them at the end,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And then being a healthy person and that's an identity.
Yeah.
It's just who you are. Yeah.
Yeah. Taking the stairs instead of taking the escalators and things. Go on, Lou.
I think a lot of the Everyman, and it's only mainly from the conversations we've had, it's a lack of awareness and education. So we constantly have, Ethan, you had a debate with Slater, one of our friends on the podcast who's a PT, and it was the calories in versus calories out. If you just stick it calories in, calories out, you're always going to lose weight. That was the debate constantly in our group chat. And then Ethan was talking about then like macros and all that sort of stuff.
I think it was the nighttime eating, wasn't it?
The nighttime eating and things, and how that makes a difference. Because I think for the everyday person, there's so much information online. People are always trying to sell you stuff. So there's all these new ideologies around, or people are always trying to come up with creative ways to convince someone to buy their program and what they're saying, where it's just too much noise for people to know what is actually healthy, what isn't healthy, what's the right thing to do, what's actually going to do me more harm than good. And they're the things that we're trying to explore through our conversations, and just to try and provide some real answers for people, where people don't feel like they have to listen to one influencer or another.
I think on this issue of weight, I think some people are lucky. Some people it's easier for them, and I think the people who are lucky don't often see themselves as lucky. They see themselves as being disciplined, or like whatever, having some sort of ability. When I think a big chunk of it is luck, because I think bodies are just different. And then I think the other thing that I try and do is, I think, to acknowledge that we only have a certain amount of motivation. And that amount of motivation, you only have a certain amount of willpower. And, different people have different amounts, but you have a finite resource of willpower. And that willpower has to be spread over everything. It's got to be spread over getting you up in the morning, getting you through your job, making sure that you pay attention to your family and, nice to your friends and that kind of thing. And it's got to get you exercising, and it's got to help you resist temptation and make the right choices and blah, blah, blah. So what you've got to do is you've got to be very careful with your willpower and don't waste it. And, if I was sitting here with something unhealthy and tempting, maybe I can use my willpower to not eat it, but then I've used up a whole lot of willpower on something that if I just hadn't been exposed to it, I wouldn't have had to have used that willpower in the first place. And, I think there's that line in the Lord's Prayer, lead me not into temptation. And, if I can be careful and protect myself from situations where I would have to use willpower, and sort of structure my environment to not have to use motivation or not have to do hard things. I think that's part of it as well.
Definitely. 100%.
Again, never looked at it like that, to be fair, Tim. I mean, just while we're on that as well, and obviously we've touched a lot on sort of weight and diet from our perspective, and obviously you're saying sort of you're touching 50, and obviously your aunt as well, who was a massive influence, and she's still playing now. Does she, I don't want to ask too much private information, but does she or yourself prescribe any sort of specific diet, or to stay in that sort of zone where, obviously, fair enough, not to sound disrespectful, but he's on at the elite of your game, but he's want to play at the top of where you can be at your age, and obviously your age. Do you do any specific? Do you do anything different than probably someone else would that maybe people can take away from this and sort of reflect on?
Yeah. I couldn't specifically speak for my aunt, who is a fantastic cook, by the way. So that's for her. But I think maybe, so far at the age of 50, there are a couple of things that have worked for me. And the one is, and, people are probably not going to want to hear this, I don't drink any alcohol. And, when I was a teenager in South Africa, nobody had heard of anybody who didn't drink alcohol. I was considered to be a complete weirdo not to drink alcohol. But something I said to one of my sons is, even if I was a light drinker, let's say I had 2 beers a week, that's 100 beers a year. I'm 50 years old. How many liters of beer, of alcohol, would my body have had to have processed by now? And the fact that I just haven't done that, the older I get, the more sort of pleased I am with that decision I took. Just don't drink anything. And, and that's kind of partly my experience, but there's a lot of research to suggest that alcohol is as bad for you as smoking. Now, there are all these educational programs and don't smoke, and, everybody knows that, but somehow this whole alcohol industry is completely under the radar. So, it's probably not what people are wanting to hear, because alcohol plays a role in socializing and, and getting together with friends, relationships, and that kind of thing. But I think there's got to be a better way. So, that's just getting the part out of it that people probably don't want to hear. But, I'm just going to take this opportunity to say what I think. I haven't regretted that decision for a moment. Then in terms of food, I think what I'm always looking for is food that makes me full, because I don't want to have to use willpower with food, because I've got very limited willpower when it comes to food. My one weakness is rice cakes, chocolate covered rice cakes. And my wife buys a pack from Tesco's, once a week, and it's gone in 5 minutes. It's gone, and then she keeps buying it because she sees me eating it. But if she never bought it, I wouldn't eat it.
Yeah. We've literally all been there.
Literally, my wife.
No chance. And I'm almost like, sorry.
At least those semi-healthy. My addiction is just cheese, eating pure blocks of cheese. So
it's the same principle. It's the same principle. If it's there, I'm going to eat it. And then I'm almost saying to myself, well, let me just eat it now. Then at least I won't eat it later. That's sort of my, let's just get this over and done with.
I do the exact same as that.
Yeah. So I do not want to be using willpower, because I have limited willpower. So I've got to be using anything I can not to be exposed to willpower. So the one thing is just don't have it there. And it's much easier to not buy something in the first place than it is to not eat it when it's sitting in your fridge. Yeah. So that would be my one comment. And then my other comment is, if you can eat food that makes you full. And because when you're feeling full, you're feeling satisfied, you're not having cravings. And that's a massive, massive one. So if you can find food that satisfies you, gives you energy, makes you feel full, then you're not going to have cravings. And then you don't have to use willpower to overcome cravings. Because in the battle between cravings and willpower, cravings will always win. And the problem is, people think that it's their fault that the cravings have won. It isn't. Cravings always win for everybody. So don't blame yourself. Just don't be in that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's even little things, right? I don't know if any of you have experienced this. So, do you know, if you do the food shopping, so sometimes we'll do the food shopping online. If I'm hungry, the food shopping's very different when I'm hungry versus if I do it when I'm full. So
Yeah, yeah.
when I'm full, we're into salads, more lean meats, veg,
Yes.
like no junk food. Hungry, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, the biscuits are on offer. There's some chocolate there, there's some crisps there,
That's
and
it.
it's probably even little things like that to mentally have a process. If whatever you're trying to achieve, to make sure you give yourself the best chance when you're doing the food shopping, for
Yeah.
example, to not make
Absolutely.
silly decisions, isn't it?
Absolutely. And even in a way, for sure it's a silly decision, but in a
Yeah.
way we have to acknowledge it's a human decision. And
Yeah.
we've got to stop kind of pretending that we are people that we aren't. We've got to
Yeah.
acknowledge that we are vulnerable to temptation, that we have limited willpower, and that we will be subject to influence. And that's your best chance, is to accept yourself with your limitations and your weaknesses, and then kind of work around those rather than just trying to like bulldoze through
Live
them.
in denial and
Yeah.
deny
Yeah.
it. You say that's not me. Oh, that's a mistake, and then punish yourself
Yeah.
for making a
Yeah,
mistake
yeah.
when actually that's you. You just need to change maybe some of your decisions around the way you behave.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
my
think just
current
as well. So sorry.
sorry, go for it.
I was just going to say, Tim, just when you were talking about the alcohol thing before, it's like the only drug that when you tell people you don't take it, they think you're weird.
Good point.
I mean, we discussed last week about the about our sort of alcohol problems, and Lewis is abstaining for a year. He's trying to go a full year.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Which
only
is the
drink
start of the rest of my life. That's the plan.
yeah.
The start this year to never again.
Sure.
That's the idea.
And then mine's not as bad as that. Mine is I'm only drinking on specific occasions. So I
Okay.
won't drink on the weekend, but like yesterday I went out. But when I do, I'll have 1 pint per hour max.
Okay.
And when I was out with my friends yesterday and I was having that 1 pint, and they were like,
Yeah.
"You're not finished your drink yet. You're not finished." And I was like, "No, I'm just taking my time." And they're like, "Just have a drink. Just have a drink."
Yeah.
And everybody always trying to encourage you. I didn't do it. And in
Okay.
the end, I had 1 or 2 pints less than what I'd planned on. But yeah, you're definitely right to say what you're saying before, where everyone thinks you're weird if you're not the one that's drinking, you know.
Yeah,
but it's definitely helping me.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a funny thing. I never thought of it like that, but it's the only drug. If you don't take it, people think you're strange. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Like since I've been telling people like I don't want to drink and things, it's even work, right? Because work, social life is built around after work we'll go to the pub. After work we'll go for a few drinks, or like Newcastle played yesterday, for example. Everyone went out on the drink, and it's hard especially. I'm not a female, so I can't say it's hard. It's harder for a man than a female. But as a male, our social life is all generally built around going to the pub or going out on the drink. Like it's trying to change that as I've got older. Of maybe like the other week, me and my brother we went and climbed some mountains in the lakes. And what a better experience that was than just going to the pub and spending 100 odd quid on beer and feeling crap the next day.
Yeah. It is. I've never. Yeah. No, I it's interesting to hear this, and I also think, maybe something that's changing is non-alcoholic beers and non-alcoholic drinks. I think they're better than they used to be, and a friend of mine, he'll always have a non-alcoholic beer, and he says he likes it, and he says he likes the taste and sort of fits in socially, and that's his solution.
It's a good idea. Yeah, me too. I might try that because I like the social aspect. I don't like the effects it has on me, and I don't like the fact it's just a waste of. I just find it now a waste of time. Like you're out drinking, but it's the next day. Like you feel horrendous, hungover, and if you're trying to be healthy or trying to be on a diet, it's like that thing when you have one biscuit, you eat the packet, right? If you go on a night out, the next day your diet's out the window for at least a week. Like on a alcohol session last week, Dean was talking about how it might be in a diet point you made, but it was around your diet always starts on a Monday. No one starts the diet on a Tuesday. No one goes, or it's always the first of the month. If it's the second, I'll wait till the first. And it's all those little things just to try and give yourself a chance, really, isn't it? To not fall into those traps of, because it's so easy to self-sabotage and those sorts of things. And try and keep yourself on track.
Mm.
Okay, so Tim, we are going to move on to sort of our last section with you here, and this is all around. So some great insight from you tonight. But if we were to summarize some of the things we've kind of talked about from your perspective, what do you think some of the things that the average man can do to improve their health? So that's both mental and physical. What are the types of things that do you think that men can do to become more healthy?
Okay. All right. Well, I think on the mental health side, I would say that distinction between mental health and mental strength is really important. And sometimes we do need to be mentally strong, and that's when we can be demanding of ourselves, and we can be critical of ourselves when we need more mental strength. But that's a short-term game. And then you need the mental health side of things, where you need to be looked after, and you need to look after yourself. Now, the interesting thing about mental health is that you can actually be strategic about it. And for me, the foremost authority on mental health is the psychologist Martin Seligman. And he's got this perspective that what makes for a good life is, he calls it PERMA. He says positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. Those are the 5 things that everybody needs for mental health. And you can look it up, and there'll be a lot of YouTube videos on it. And I mean, he's written a couple of books on it. The concept is PERMA, or flourishing, and the man is Martin Seligman. So he's kind of the number one expert. But the thing is, when it comes to finding positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment, you've actually got to be strategic. And being strategic in some ways takes mental strength. So you've got to be motivated. You've got to be focused. You've got to be confident that it's going to work, to go and put yourself in the situations where you're going to get influenced and going to get the outside in that is going to give you the mental health. So these 2 things, they're not separate. They interact with each other. And sometimes you need mental strength to design an environment that is going to give you mental health. And then the mental health, it's much easier when you're feeling mentally healthy to sort of use mental strength, because you've got reserves. So, so that's the one thing, is to say you do need to be strategic, and it helps to kind of have a little bit of insight or know what's going on. And this Martin Seligman guy, he's an amazing sort of lifetime of work that he's done. And then the other thing with the mental health would be just that acceptance that we are human, we are fallible, we have limited willpower, and not to sort of imagine that we have these unlimited reserves, or that we should be somehow immune to temptation or stress. And that hopefully can let us be more forgiving of ourselves, more humble, but with that humility comes to be strategic. So that really would be my comment on mental health and mental strength. When it comes to physical health, in some ways, the gateway, like I said, I think is breathing, it's movement. Those are kind of a connection between our minds and our bodies. And then we had we're talking about eating, and I think eating, it's really important to, again, like you said, Lewis, there are times when you make better decisions than others. So can we make those decisions in those times and avoid temptation? And my sort of final eating tip was find something that satisfies you. And I mean, just fairly randomly, I've recently discovered fava bean flour. And fava bean is it's a broad bean. Now, not everybody can digest broad beans. You've got to have a particular sort of gene that enables you to digest it. But if you do, but fava bean, if you can digest it, it's this really sort of nourishing, satisfying flour. And I have a fava bean and oat pancake for breakfast every morning. And I sort of joke with my wife that, this is breakfast, lunch, and dinner all in one go, because it really does leave me feeling very satisfied. And when I'm feeling satisfied, I don't have cravings. And that's a whole sort of easier side of things. So find something that works. And, at the moment, that works for me. And then, the last thing I'd say on the exercise side is less is more. And I think one of the major obstacles to exercise is thinking that because you haven't done it for a while, you've got to do extra. And then you don't feel like doing the extra, and then you don't do it. And then you don't do it, and then you think you've got to do extra, and then you're less likely to do that. And my strategy is the longer I've gone without, the easier my startup session is going to be. And that's a big one. So really remember, less is more. And if it's just going for a walk, or it's just spending 5 minutes or 7 minutes or something, just do something. And again, it's be kind to yourself, and acknowledge yourself. And again, to go back to cycling, I read the at the time he was the head coach of Team Sky, and he said the first thing he does when he's writing a fitness program for these professional cyclists is to consider what they're doing in their daily lives. And I thought, well, these guys are full-time professionals. What could they be doing? But he's still prioritizing their daily lives. And then, well, what about us? We've got jobs, we've got families, we've got hobbies, we've got friends.
Yeah.
You have to take that into account as well, rather than just imagining that somehow the exercise is going to happen. So, yeah. And, for me, the thing with exercise is a long game. You want to be doing it when you're my age, and, and I want to be doing it when I'm my aunt's age.
Yeah.
So that's what you got to think about. And how can that happen? And, I think less is more is, a little bit often is much better than a lot infrequently.
Yeah, that is some really good tips. And just when you were talking there, I'm exactly like, I am that person that you're describing. And I suppose that's why you said it, right? Because that's what most people are.
Yeah.
I'm in a fairly unhealthy phase physically at the moment. Haven't been playing football for a while. I've pulled my hamstring, but then I've gone down this like mental sort of probably a little bit of a hole of, but I can't run how I used to. I'm not as fit as I used to. And in my head, instead of just going and doing a 3K, I'm thinking, I need to do a 10K, but I'm not fit enough to do a 10K now because I haven't ran in 2 months. So, and it's sort of putting those barriers in your head instead of just taking action and making some movement, as you say.
Yes. And, don't do the 10K. And if the 3K is walk and run, or if it's just walk, great.
Yeah.
You're getting out there.
Yeah, it's really good advice.
No.
I feel like Ethan's got a question.
No, I'm just I'm trying to digest it all. Like I say, I've struggled with weight and mental health, physical health, but I'm probably, my friends obviously say I'm probably the most active fat person they know, because I'm that hard, and I train like a sort of, I don't want to say an elite athlete, but I wouldn't say I'm far off, to be honest, Tim. But there's a lot to take in there, and also I'm just thinking in my head we should get your aunt on for an episode sometime. She sounds like quite a woman.
I'll be
sure,
very
show us all up.
I'll pass it on. Yeah.
Yeah. No, well, Tim, honestly, this has been super helpful for us as literally the Everyman, guys who we're just normal guys who are just trying to make a little bit of a difference in our own lives and other men's lives. And you've been so insightful, and we're so grateful that you came on. And I've learnt loads tonight. And I'm just super happy you came. No,
well, thanks so much for having me. And it's great just to kind of hang out and talk. And you say we're the Everyman, and we are. And the funny thing is, the elite athletes, they're Everyman as well.
Yeah.
They happen to be very, very good at one thing. But beyond that, they're good at stuff. They're bad at stuff. Same as us. We're also good and bad at stuff. So yeah. Well, Tim,
just quickly, can I just ask one quick question? Just
because
it's just been so. One thing that I struggle with, Tim, is I only play Sunday league football, and half the time I'm just on the bench. But before a game, I just cannot stop going on the toilet. Like I don't know if it's just the nerves, and I was just wondering, are there elite athletes that have the similar problem? Is there something that you can do to counteract that? because it doesn't matter what I eat the night before. It's just,
Yes.
I guess it's just the nerves, you know.
Yeah. I think it is, and rather out than in. So, just go for it. Just make sure there's a toilet nearby.
Yeah.
Our pitch is as far away from a toilet as you can get. So if you,
Oh, really?
if you haven't gone, it's too
Okay.
late. So
To be fair, though, you're absolutely downplaying it. We have by far the best Sunday League pitch in the whole of the Northeast by a mile. We play
Really?
university pitches,
Really?
university pitches, and it's
Okay.
like they do. If there's a little bit of rain, they'll actually just call the game off because they don't
Wow.
want us to damage the pitch.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
it for the standard we're playing now, it's incredible.
You
Just
know,
an arm and a leg,
that
like.
is-
But
that's fantastic. I mean, it makes such a difference to the game of football to have a good pitch. It's such
Yeah.
fun when you get on some good grass.
yeah.
absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
again, thank you very much, Tim. We are
Yeah.
super grateful. And
Thanks for having me.
yeah, we
Does
hope to-
Ethan want to do his thing quickly? The hear no evil, see no evil.
I think he
I was
does.
gonna say, or Lewis just
Yeah.
say to cut us. Tim, I think he's just. I think Lewis doesn't want me to talk anymore. I think he gets sick of hearing my voice at times. To be fair, but yeah, Tim,
Not
before
sure
you
at
go,
all.
mate, I want to say thanks from me as well. It's really been insightful, and hopefully next time you're up in Newcastle this week, with the same family not, and you fancy a game of squash, I'd like to see you take on Lewis. That would be good. If we can get,
Who can't play squash?
we'll live stream that and see how bad he actually is.
All right, definitely.
Definitely. And something we just like ask guests as well. I know we've picked your brains a lot, but we'll do something called See No Evil, Hear No Evil, which is, I know it's a film in the 1980s with Richard Pryor, but basically just either a podcast or a book that you've listened to or read that was beneficial to you throughout your life that you would recommend to someone just who was looking for something to listen to or read, basically. Just anything that would be beneficial, if that's all right.
Yeah, wow. Well, there are a few, but maybe what I'll do is I'll actually go for a novel. The novel Catch 22. And I was just I was sending a message to my cousin who's 2 years younger than me. We lifelong friends, very close friends, and we bonded over this novel Catch 22, and it's just a novel where guys. It's about a gunner in the Second World War who's just recognizing that life can be a bit out of control and a bit crazy, and he's trying to regain control of things. And I love that book. I love that story. So that would be my recommendation.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Tim. We'll get that on the list. I also want to point out as well, I like how Dean was agreeing with you, like he knows exactly what book it is, and that he was like, yeah, great book, Tim. Great.
I was just looking at it online at the same time.
Catch 22.
I just thought Catch 22 is a good saying, isn't it? So I imagine it'll be a good book.
Yeah.
That's the work, Dean. If it's got a good title, it'll be a good book. But thanks for that, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, lovely to meet you all, and all the best, and hopefully
Thanks again, Tim.
We're super grateful.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, mate. Bye now.
Well, guys, we've just had our first podcast episode there with Tim, our first ever guest. Wow, what a podcast episode that was.
Mental.
Yeah, what a insightful guest as well, might I say. I didn't think I'd take as much away from that as actually now sitting here just having a chat with him. You know what I mean? We've well and truly picked his brains. But by the way, his auntie, some going at the moment from her, still being active at that age. I think we'll have to definitely get her on. I don't think he thinks we're joking. We should definitely get her on the podcast. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's some longevity. What a woman.
No, I
think
agree.
it probably keeps her young.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the key, right? How many of us, because he posed a really good question when it was around, so many, like, what would people want? Would they want the £10 million and never play sport again? Or actually not take the money and be able to be healthy and active for the rest of your life? Serious question, guys. What would you do?
Let me go first.
10 million, mate. 10 million. No, I get the point. Like, because you know, people I bang on all the time, but my love of football, I play it every day if I could quit my job and just kick a ball into a goal all day every day, you know. But it's the love of the sport that keeps you going. And like I say, I think, you know, quite often with that, people that maybe, you know, if she was to give it up, you know, maybe there's sometimes nothing to live for. You live for the sport, you know. So like I say, it probably keeps her young. Definitely. And, you know, I'm looking forward to getting into, you know, over 35s, over 40s, and then maybe walking football when I'm 79 years old as well, you know. Love nothing more than to be kicking a ball. There'll be a ball on my gravestone, I tell you.
I definitely don't disagree that there will be. Ethan, so you've obviously just had a bit of health problems. I'm not sure you've mentioned it on this one. No, you did. You did. You did bring up the fact you had back surgery. So that's 4 out of 4. Well done. Bingo card is full. So as someone who's gone through some health issues recently, when you get asked that question, would you rather be healthy or have money?
What health issues, Lewis? I'm fitting well. I don't know what you're on about. Yeah, for everyone that didn't hear in the podcast, I've had a back issue that's ongoing. Lewis didn't know what to do with himself there, to be fair, which is what I wanted. I wanted to see him go bright red on the screen. Yeah, so for me, I think I've mentioned it before. My mental health took a massive nosedive when I did be back, and the fact that I've not been able to work, like I'm a social butterfly, so you know, I love my people I work with. I love my job. You know, I haven't been able to go out with my friends drinking. It had a negative impact on my relationship with my girlfriend at the time. You know, for me, I think I'm lucky enough as well to also have people in my life who are very fit and active, who are also very encouraging. So it's not necessarily just me, but the likes of my friend Ryan, or my friend Rob, and Matty, people who are sort of massive influences in the fitness side of things. And you know, I can go to them and we can go train. You know, we can go to the gym and we go out running. Obviously, before my back injury, cycling. You know, I go in the sea with Dixon Ryan as well. So you know, there's a lot of things I can do. And if you take those elements out of my life, not even the team sport like football, which I enjoy, the camaraderie and everything like that. If you take just the basic training elements of going to the gym or going on a bike or running, you know, I don't think that there would be no point. You know what I mean? Especially with Tim saying as well, with the World Cup, when I having the World Cup medal and saying, you know, so what? That put things into perspective, because money isn't the be all and end all. You know, winning the World Cup probably is an aim for every young lad who associates with football. That's going to be the goal. You know, seeing obviously Messi win the World Cup this year. But personally, to me, I think going back to your question, sorry, Lou, is the fact that I would want to train and be healthy, and I enjoy it. You know, it's not a slug for me. I do get obviously what Tim said about the motivation, the drive, and sort of having the willpower. But for me, I look forward to getting up and going to the gym or going for a swim, especially with my back. Swimming's been a massive thing for me, and I'll be able to go to the pool at Nuffield, and all the older men and women have been great there, and I have crack with them. So even though I've not been able to train in some aspects with my pals, and as hard as I would like, I have been able to train in other aspects, and I've always kept active. And like you said there, I think the trick is to keep active and keep going. So I mean, just to sum it up, I think I wouldn't take £10 million sit on me arse, to excuse me French. You know, I would want to get up at 5:30 and go to the gym with my pals every day and just enjoy it. You know, and it is a relief. And I think if you listen to this or you watch this and you don't go to the gym, or you're scared to go to the gym because you might look different to someone else, or you know, you might feel like you're not ready, or you might be embarrassed. You know, we've all been there. But you've got to think, like, everyone has been in that situation. Nobody walks in the gym and thinks they're Arnold Schwarzenegger or, you know, Sly Stallone. So it's all about taking that first step. And I would, obviously, I bang the drum with this. I would say, just the first step is go to the gym, walk in the door, find something you're comfortable with, and become an expert at that. You know, make friends in the gym, look on Instagram, look at sources you can trust, you know, speak to your doctors if you want to go down that route. There's so many avenues you could go down, and again, the physical side of things, and just feel good about yourself. You know, you don't have to look like the bodybuilders I mentioned, or the Hollywood A-listers like Ryan Reynolds, or things like that. You just got to, as long as you feel good in yourself, that for me is just the main point. And yeah, definitely spending over money. What about you, Lou? Would you go back to Plymouth Argyle and retire at this age for £10 million, or would you want to keep playing?
No, not at all. I think the older I'm getting, the more I'm conscious about my health, and the more it actually concerns me because you realize you're not going to live forever because you start losing family, or you see people who are older and you just become more aware of it. Where younger me, like all of us, we think we're going to be here forever and life just keeps going on and on and on. But we've all lost family or friends where now we realize that. So my health is definitely more important to me than money, but my everyday actions don't show that. So when I listened to Tim tonight, everything he said and where he was identifying certain gaps and opportunities and things, he was talking about me. And he'll be talking about lots of our listeners, but the behaviors he was talking around, I could resonate with them all. So that's where, for me, having spent the time we did with Tim, it's probably for me to go away and really let it sink in around some of the things he said. The biggest thing for me, though, was the mental strength versus mental health. That's the one thing that I've never looked at mental health like that. I've looked at it as the same thing where, yeah, it's people's choices versus things they can't affect. I've always thought you can affect it all. Like if you're struggling with whether it's addiction, drugs, alcohol, anger, PTSD, whatever that is, and I'm not saying that to downplay it, but whatever your range of mental health sort of barrier or problem is, I always thought consciously you can do something about that. But actually, the way he framed it and put it across made me realize that's something that I have never really thought of, and that's something that I'm really keen to explore and learn more about, because I think that'll help me with my own battles and challenges that I'll have in my own life, and maybe stop being so hard on myself.
Exactly. I think just to cut in as well, something I've heard a lot of even the past couple of years, and I think a lot of people who do podcasts and are social media influencers, I've heard it initially on Ben Foster's podcast, things like that, is control the controllables. So you can only control what's in what you can control, and whatever you think about, whether that's something at work or a home life or relationship problems, if you can't control that issue, you're going to beat yourself up to the point where you're a nervous wreck or anxious over it. But really, you've got to try and get past that barrier and realize you can't control that situation, and you've got to focus on what you can control. So diet, going to the gym. As Tim said, the definition between elite and the everyman, it's such a big line. And he was saying about obviously the cyclists, how there's that website you can compare yourself to, and we mentioned as well football. When you're watching football on the TV, you think I could bend that free kick in from 30 yards. I've seen Lewis do it on a Sunday, kick in from probably not 30 yards, maybe 20 yards or something. But you think how can they not do it in that way? You can, but then you realise that the stakes are so much higher at an elite level. And I think Tim just broke it down, like you said, he broke down amazingly. And what a bloke! Had a lot of positive thoughts to sort of share with us. Obviously, something that we're probably putting him out of his comfort zone, because obviously he's so used to helping the elite. Coming on, chatting with us, the everyman, I think he was top draw, and I hope people can take away a lot from this episode.
Yeah, I think he was just an incredible guest. For what a first guest, in the sense of someone who came on already super passionate around mental and physical health. You could hear that in the way he was speaking. There's loads of things that I'm going to take away from it, and I'm, in a really sad way, I'm really looking forward to listening to it and getting it from that fresh perspective, because we're new to this, right? And that whole time I was thinking, I was just listening and I was really learning. And then I was like, shit, I've got to ask him a question here. Like, I've got to actually, I can't just let him just stop, because I have to keep it going. So, yeah, that's a challenge for me moving forward, I think.
It did well, mate, really well.
Yeah, Lou, you were top draw there. I want to apologise to anyone who's listening and watching. Apparently, I was dropping out a little bit with my signal. And also anyone who watches Dean as well. Dean was touching a lot during that podcast. At some point, he was like, this on camera. So
I was just so interested in what he was saying. I was just listening, and I was forgetting I was on the podcast at times because I was so interested in what he was saying. So yeah, apologies if my face looks worse than it already does.
It's looking
Very
very
handsome.
slim, mate. You have the thing that I don't. So I've just got these hamster cheeks at the minute because I've put on loads of weight, just being a fat knacker. And you've got cheekbones. So well done.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You've got some
Aye.
cheekbones going on for the wedding.
4 weeks,
Yeah,
mate. 4 weeks.
Yeah,
You
very,
get
very
married
good.
before.
Boys, we'll wrap it there. What a great night. Ethan, have you got a message to people? What do they need to do? Do they need to like, comment, tag, share, subscribe? Do they need to do all of that?
Live long and prosper. That's all you need to do. Live long and prosper. No, yeah, like, share, subscribe. We'll put some links everywhere. I've got a new
We
microphone.
won't. We can't do that yet. We can't do that yet.
All right. Well, there'll not be links yet, but there'll be links on Facebook, Twitter.
We haven't got Twitter yet.
Buy WH Smith. You can buy us. Every good bookstore you can find with. And
Should we do a calendar?
like a naked one?
Should we do a calendar?
I did that for one of my
Yeah.
ex-girlfriends.
Yeah, but didn't she put a restraining order on you for it?
Is that why she's your ex-girlfriend?
Yeah.
So basically, I put my face, when I was fully shaven, I was looking fat, put my fat face on loads of like topless men and like models, and then did it for every month of the year. And then we broke up. So I don't know what happened to that calendar.
The calendar's definitely still in your bedroom.
It's in Richie's
No
mom's
comment.
bedroom. If Richie's watching,
mom's bedroom.
Richie's mom's bedroom. It was not being very well, by
Brilliant.
the way. So out to Richie's mom. She's a great. Not being too well, so I'm sending lots of. But
Shout out to Richie's mum.
so
All right,
Richie's mum.
gents.
Right. Boys, we'll wrap it up.
Thank you very much for tonight. Legends. What a great night. The Three Musketeers saved it because the other guys bottled it, but well done.
Well,
Night, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.